Today we're talking to Jimmy Wales, founder of Wikipedia.org. Jimmy, thanks for taking the time to speak with us today.
Sure, great.
Now, with respect to Wikipedia, what role do you see Wikipedia playing on the internet, but also on overall society?
Well, so on the internet, we're now the fifth most popular website and have been in the same slot basically for over a year, a couple of years. And, we're probably the most linguistically diverse site. We're in over 175 languages that have at least 1,000 articles. And we're really focused on our role in the developing world, in the languages of the developing world. And in that space online, in many cases, we're going to be one of the first major websites to really be there because we're so supportive of that part of the world, and we can afford to be supportive whether it makes economic sense or not.
And what do you mean by supportive?
Well, our software is translated into multiple languages. We have volunteers who are out there working to try to find people to work in those languages. I would say, in a lot of the languages, there aren't that many websites available. Some smaller local content, but your Microsoft, Yahoo, Googles of the world, it's not a criticism of them, but they really can't afford to pay that much attention to smaller languages in a way that our community can. So that's a part of the role that we play, on the internet. And then in society more generally, I think everybody who is likely to see this video has had their life impacted by Wikipedia and uses it, on a regular basis. But I think that there's a second wave of impact that I think we're going to have that I think is kind of interesting. So if you're speaking English or German or European language, Japanese, Chinese, the biggest problem that you face with respect to information is actually an overload of information. You go to a search engine and you type, Washington, D.C., and you get back millions of things, and maybe you just need a basic summary. And that's what Wikipedia normally can give you, is a quick orientation to a subject. But in a lot of languages, the real problem that they face is lack of access to information at all. And so just one statistic that I've heard, and I don't know if this is still true, but a few years ago it was said that the number of books translated into Arabic every year is about the same as the number of books translated into German every day. Even though it's a much larger population of people speaking Arabic, there's just a real lack of flow of information into Arabic. It gets much worse when you think about a language like Swahili or Wolof is one of my favorite small Wikipedias now. They have 1,000 articles in Wolof, which is a language in Senegal. And in these languages, the access to information that people have in their mother tongue is just incredibly small. And so as we build Wikipedia in those languages, in many cases, it's going to be the first opportunity that people have to get access to information about whatever topic that they may be interested in. You can imagine, in Swahili, it's probably not that hard to find information about London or New York, but it may be hard to find information about the USB standard. And so you're trying to learn technology, you're trying to learn computers, and you just have no information unless you learn English or French or something like this. And that's a big barrier to getting people online, getting people sort of integrated with the global conversation. And so I think that linguistic diversity is something that we bring to the table that I think is really important.
And is Wikipedia really more accurate than the Encyclopedia Britannica? I've heard lots of stories.
Well, it varies.
Okay.
It depends. The best academic evidence we have is unfortunately more than 3 years old now. And this was a study that was published in Nature where Wikipedia, they sent a group of articles out from Britannica and from Wikipedia of similar length, similar topics. And they found, experts reviewed them, and they found that Wikipedia had on average around 4 errors per article, and Britannica had on average 3. So 3 years ago, we weren't quite as good as Britannica. I think for a lot of people, what was surprising about that wasn't that there were 4 errors per article in Wikipedia, but that there were 3 in Britannica, because people think of Britannica as somehow, handed down from on high and perfect, but it isn't. And it's a great encyclopedia, but it's full of errors, as all reference works are. And it's just the nature of the difficulty of doing good quality reference work. These days, I think, in certain topics, we're definitely better than Britannica just because we cover the topics in a much more comprehensive way. But there's still errors in Wikipedia, unfortunately, and we're doing our best to fix them, but it takes time.
How did the idea of Wikipedia start?
So I was watching the growth of the free software movement, or open source software as most people know it, and I saw that groups of programmers were coming together online to collaborate to build really large-scale software projects, very successful, very high-quality software. And I put a lot of thought into how is that possible, what makes that work. And it turns out that the free licensing model is really important. You have to deal with certain incentive issues. If you've got a group of people working together on a project, they want to make sure that their work doesn't get locked up and that it'll always be free. And so they need a licensing structure that gives everybody a comfort that they're contributing to the commons. So that's a big part of it. So then I was thinking, well, seeing this and seeing that this was really an important phenomenon in software made me realize that, this could be applied maybe more broadly than just software. And realize that it makes sense that collaboration would start first with programmers, because if they need a tool to be able to collaborate, they just build their own tools, which is what they did. So they built like CVS, concurrent versioning system, where they can check in and out code. And so different people can be working on the same project globally, different time zones and whatever. Those kinds of tools and coordination they built for themselves. And I realized, hey, if other people had those kinds of tools, we could work together on all kinds of things. And that was kind of the early beginnings of the idea.
And now I'd imagine you could have applied that to a lot of different contexts, or content for that matter. What made you think of encyclopedia, online encyclopedia?
Well, I think the main thing is that encyclopedia seemed easy to collaborate on, and I still think that's true. In fact, when I first had the idea, I was in a panic because I thought it was so obvious that everybody was going to do it, and 2 years later, nobody else was doing it still. But the main thing about it is, if I say encyclopedia article about the Eiffel Tower, pretty much everybody knows what that is. You know what it's supposed to be like at the end of the day. And we can quibble over the details, but you pretty much have a good idea of what you're trying to create. That gives you certain inherent standards, quality standards, direction. It just seems like a fairly easy thing, and also it's a defined unit. It becomes useful very quickly, as opposed to if I say, well, let's collaborate on writing a novel, right? Novel isn't really useful until it's done. It's also a long, sustained work. It's also, if I tell you it's a novel about pain and redemption, we have no guidance whatsoever. We have no idea what we're doing, so it's just a fairly straightforward thing to write an encyclopedia article. So that was kind of it.
Okay, and then how did you go from this idea of open source software meets encyclopedia to making it happen? And then from making it happen to making it big, because those are two kind of big jumps.
Well, so the first attempt to build the free encyclopedia was a failure. This was called Nupedia. It was the project that Wikipedia grew out of later. And basically, the issue was I didn't really understand about communities. There were a lot of things that nobody really knew at the time. And so Nupedia was a very top-down, very highly structured, very academic project, and one which in the end didn't work because it was such a burden for the contributors to be able to participate. Wikipedia grew out of that.